All right. Well, let me get myself situated here. Good morning. Good morning to everyone. As you can see, it is time to gather your coffee or your tea or whatever fun drink you are excited to have. It's going to take me a moment. I'm moving a little slow this morning. Please forgive me. I thought I was ready last night, but I woke up this morning and realized that I was not. So I'm trying to gather my wits. Okay, grab your coffee, ladies and gentlemen, and all the super squatties out there in the universe. Grab yourselves a cup of coffee if you've got it, a cup of tea if you prefer. You know what I've been into recently? I've been hitting the matcha. Okay, so if you're into matcha and things like that, jump on in to our chat. Hit the thumbs up if you don't mind to say welcome to yourself and to for me to welcome you as well. Press that thumbs up just to let us know, can you hear me out there in YouTube microphone land? Okay. Also, that helps push a little bit of activity also on my channel. And remember, guys, I'm going to have me a big screen blast to let everyone know that we're going to have a, what do you call it, a membership push here in the next month or so. I have a feeling in the Sussex world, we are going to need it. All right, so for quick intro, while you're grabbing your coffee, let me let you know this channel is all for success. And you know what? I might have to work on that marketing and all. What I like to do is show my support for all things Duke and Duchess of Sussex and just regular Harry and Meghan. And of course, their little ones, Lilibet and Archie. Supporting a person and a group or a family that, from my standpoint, are people who are trying to do good things and to do good work. People who are trying to live a decent life and just move forward in their endeavors without fear or favor. They are worth being supported. And I come at everything from the viewpoint, from the position of a parent of adult children. Harry and Meghan, save for a few years, would be in my parenting range. And because I have children myself, it is really perplexing to me to think about my children having to navigate the world, even though they do in their own rights. They have to navigate the goods and the bads and the ups and the downs. But when I think about the wave of opposition that comes against Harry and Meghan just simply living their lives and trying to do what they think grown-ups should do, that wave of opposition unnecessarily poised against them really makes me angry as a parent. And in most cases, the average parent, especially those of decent backgrounds, would be absolutely unforgivably furious at what has been launched against them. And therefore, I want you to understand that is the space that I sit in, and it is the position from which I operate. So I'm not asking everyone to be wonderful lovers of anyone in particular, and I most certainly would not ask anyone to get into some form of idol worship. That is what has brought us to these places we live in the world today. Simply sitting around and loving and living in the light of celebrities and those who you've been told are somehow worthy of your attention, but also your adoration and your unquestioning devotion. It is very obvious where we are in our world that we are operating falsely, because that shouldn't be your attitude in the first place. You can admire what people do, right? You can use these type of people as mentors and think to yourself, oh my goodness, this person is doing something great and wonderful. I hope that I too can do something great and wonderful. They can be a motivation for you, right? You should look to what they do and think about, well, how can I motivate myself to do something just as interesting? But that is about where you should land. But here in the world that we live in today, people have stepped over into a place of idolizing, being adoring, and in like some form of worship of people who are either entertainers, celebrities, and dare I say, royals. You do not need to worship them. Not like that. Okay? Now, with that being said, here's what we're going to do today. We're going to chat just a little bit because I am one of those who I do not do immediate reactions to instantaneous droplets of news. Okay? I can't keep up that quickly. I'm not that fast. So I'm not able to do that. I'm definitely more suited to watch what is being talked about for a couple of days, to get a feel for how people are thinking about it or feeling about it, and then from there, jump in with my commentary. That's my claim to fame. That's generally how I operate. So with that being said, let's push on over to a couple of little pics and slides that I hope I have in here correctly, although I don't know. Again, you guys stand by for me and my technical expertise. Stand by for the technical expert that I am not. Hopefully, I still have sound. Hopefully, you can see some of the slides that I'll throw up. Also, be reminded, children with adult children, get out there and do some exercises. Oh, just to let you know, I have recently incorporated a little bit of Tai Chi. So, for those of you who are interested in the Tai Chi world of moving around, get it together and get that Tai Chi going and stretch those muscles and everything. I'm going to do this challenge. It's supposed to be 30 days, and then I'll see if I notice any benefits. But for any of you interested in something new in the exercise realm, try Tai Chi. I'm going to jump on that wagon right now. It seems to be all the rage. So listen, following along here, here's the thing. What we have to know is, one, you do not need to have some sort of false sense of love and adoration for any person or persons. And here is where the story comes in with what we like about Megan. I love the chocolate candy. I hope you do too. Chocolate candy with flower petals. Fantastic. Okay, so everybody get out there and get yourself some. How can you go wrong? For those of you who are interested in other products, she has beautiful scented candles. She has wonderful fruit spreads for toast. How can you go wrong with that? That sounds delicious. Everyone should try that. So get out there if you want to order some of that. Support her and her work. That's fantastic. I love the taste of the stuff. And I tell you what, I really enjoy doing is ordering these things and giving them as gifts. Fantastic. That is the place in which this working mom operates. For you and I, we don't see anything wrong with that, right? From the perspective of the average, everyday, decent person, working person, you can't find something wrong with this, right? This is an individual who was a working actress for X number of years on a fun show. suits. And most of us are like, well done. You achieved a role. It was fun. You got out there and you did that. Great, right? The next phase of that person's life, you see, okay, you meet a partner, you meet someone that you can sit with and chat with, and somebody that you love being with. Boom, you get married. Ta-da! Isn't that lovely? We don't see anything villainous in this. Why? Because we are normal. Normal meaning we are falling between two sets of, we're falling within a range of the way typical humans behave, right? Now, remember, I said typical humans. I don't know if there is something outside of the band of human operating in the space as a human. Now, I do watch a lot of science fiction. I do read a lot of, what do you call it? Conspiracy theory information, because for me it's entertaining. So I am not speaking of those that might be in and around and among us that actually do not fall in the band we identify as human. But remember, in the realm of conspiracy, in the realm of science fiction, they might be out there. And these creatures, okay, these entities, dare I say, they may be operating on a completely different band of what is operationally normal for them. Okay? So I want you all, sit back, go with me here for a minute. Let's dance over in the world of bizarre possibilities. If there were entities that operate on a different playing field or are operating in a different dimension, if you watch a lot of Twilight Zone, at a different frequency, if you watch a lot of Stargate, right? These entities, they may have a set of rules to live by that are completely and totally in opposition to you and I, the humans, right? To this band of entities, it might be perfectly sound to have children, have offspring, family in your life. But if you can, do everything and anything in your power to create pain and agony for your offspring. For all you know, there may be entities that operate with that premise. You know? All right? I know you're laughing at me out there. I can feel it. But you understand what I'm getting at, right? For all you know, there could be entities living an existence where they know they may have to destroy their children. And thus they do things and live in a certain way that causing conflict and catastrophe for their offspring, that may in fact be normal. Okay? There also may be an existence, an entity structure, wherein there is no real responsibility to live and operate in the reality that we understand. And for humans, average, everyday, workaday human, right? We live in a physical world, right? We operate with things being, in our perception, solid, right? You go outside, you get in your car. You need to get in your car to drive down the street. But imagine if you lived in a reality or an existence, let's say, where you don't ever have to believe anything is real except what you say is real, right? Imagine. So I could walk around and I could say to someone, you know, I don't care what you do. I don't care where you go. I don't care what you're doing. I don't care what's right or wrong. That doesn't matter. There is no such thing. Being decent to other people, treating other people well, that doesn't mean anything. If you're a different type of entity, your rules may be that the only thing that matters is what I want, right? So you wake up in the morning and you eat your food and you go get your meals and you operate in your day. It for me that means that perhaps I would go to my workplace or perhaps I wouldn't. It wouldn't matter because I can do whatever I want and I don't have to think about how it affects anyone else, right? So there are possibly, because I watch a lot of science fiction, I always note that there may be creatures, entities within our periphery that are operating with a completely different set of rules and a completely different set of what is normal to us, the humans. I know what you're wondering, right? All for success. Where are you going? What is the? Where are you going with this? Well, what that brings me to, ladies and gentlemen, is the news of the week. So while our wonderful Sussex family has been going to different events, they went to the NBA basketball game. I think that's what I had pictured in my thumbnail this morning. And while they're operating out there, having a great time, meeting and greeting, sitting and chatting with one of the queens here in the United States that we know to be Queen Latifah, a prominent rapper in the 80s and the 90s. And then she became more of an actress. And they're sitting there chit-chatting with Queen Latifah. So just think about that entire row was nothing but royalty, right? The American brand of royalty. Harry and Meghan, Queen Latifah, and then the super players of the NBA. And they're having a great time. And then sitting up in the rafters somewhere in the back there was a former President Obama and a beautiful young lady, Michelle Obama, and a gorgeous young daughter, Sasha or Malia. I believe it was Malia, sitting back there having a great time. So this is what they were doing. Enjoying themselves, being at the basketball games, meet and greets, handshaking, and cheering for their team. Meanwhile, while they were doing the normal, average, everyday, typical human things, across the way, we had to take our focus and zone in on the Prince, formerly Andrew, who, for my entire life of understanding and knowing about the royal family, for my entire life, these folks have been on this storyline or in the midst of questionable behavior, questionable issues here and there. In other words, Prince Andrew and his wife, former Prince Andrew and his wife, Sarah Ferguson, periodically would show up in the media with some sort of hinted at issue. It might have been, oh my goodness, why did this person ask for a couple of $1 million from a Saudi royal or from a Middle Eastern royal? Or why did, in the early days, why was Sarah Ferguson pictured with somebody giving her a foot massage or something to that nature, even though she and her husband had formally divorced Prince Andrew? But yet her life and the men and women that she associated with and the things that she did or didn't do would somehow show up from time to time, right? And people would just kind of think, well, that's pretty lousy behavior. But that was about the gist of it. But what we are now, folks, is we are now in a place because of the recent political changes here in the United States and because of the most recent movement of those political changes, the turmoil. We entered a time of turmoil. Don't know how long this may last, but it has created an environment within which things that used to be in the news, someone would handle it, it would get resolved, and then it would leave the news. Those days have ended. And of course, with the invention of social media, online usage, the internet in general, nothing disappears from the front of our view. So, with that in mind, here's what we've got happening in our world. We have turmoil here in the United States that is sordid, depraved, but also intersects with our political structure. And I'm referring to, of course, many people following in the news, the revelations that are falling out of the Epstein files. So we're seeing people who were situated together or working together to manipulate money markets. We've seen people sit together, working together to manipulate whether or not the next group of people born have a certain look. We're sitting and watching that there have been a small number of people that have been gallivanting all over the world, determining what they believe the rest of the world should be concerned about, or how the rest of the world, i.e., the humans, should behave, what the humans should believe, what the rest of the humans should be doing, right? So what we've noticed is we're looking at this system here on this side of the water where this intersection of extremely wealthy people with our political and an influence into our daily lives has been enormous, and it is becoming quite a revelation. Things that we may not have believed other people were interested in. Like, it would have never occurred to me that someone outside of my everyday family would be concerned about how many children I may or may not have. It never occurred to me that someone outside of my own realm of understanding would be concerned about whether I am or am not educated, whether or not I actually get to read books that I like to read. But what you're finding and what the Epstein files are revealing is that for some unknown reason, people of all persuasions have been affected and are being led in a way of more intense than just general advertising, being pushed to think and believe things for someone else's greater purpose. So I encourage everyone who is a little bit plugged in to what's happening with the Epstein files. I'm not saying get into all the obscure details, but I mean in the overall sense. Just be aware and notice how these people have sat down together to come up with ideas and processes which move our money and move our thought processes and our wants and interests in the directions that they want them to go. Now, here's where the other side of the water comes in. That key player there, that key player, former prince, is far more intertwined in this manipulation game and amongst these manipulation people, at the same time probably not being aware of his purpose in their plan. In other words, just as manipulated as he probably believed himself to lord power over others, he was probably not aware of how useful and manipulated, in fact, he may have been. I mean, he's coming from a royal perspective, already believing in the absolute structure that his family, and they love to say their blood, as if it is something different from what is going through your body systems. And in fact, it may be, right? But whatever they determine their blood to be, that it must in fact rule over everyone else. And here is an individual who is definitely from that place. That is the world they come from. Their people and their blood and their close family and friends, or extended family and friends, they just don't go too far from their own tree, right? They reach and grab distant cousins to always marry and remarry in and marry back in again and mix it up and marry again. So if they pull from any royal family all over the planet, it's somehow somebody related to them because they set it up that way. Right? So here's this individual and caught in his web of being intertwined and is now intersecting with the debacle that is the Epstein files. Because more of his behavior that had previously been hidden is now viewable. And boy, is it interesting. We're seeing photos of him chit-chatting with kids and playing with children, and things are showing up, and you're going to ask yourself, who is that? Where was that taken? What was happening? We don't know. But this revelation of the Epstein files will start to dig things out and throw things at the walls. Right? So along with that is going to be the people being swept up in it is everyone who is around you. That's going to be even his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, otherwise known as Fergie, because she would be on the phone chit-chatting or not the phone, but sending text messages and emails. And guys, can anyone explain to me why these people would be sending so many emails to each other? Isn't that crazy? To me, that's absolutely crazy. I'm going to, while you think about that question, I'm going to take a moment. Let me see who is in the chat here, because you guys have let me ramble on and on. So let's see who's here in the chat. Hang on a second. Oh, look at there. Looky. If it's not Super Squatty, Lorna Williams, thank you again for being here. I love it that you're here. You always tell me what's going on. You keep me up to date. She lets me know she can hear, and I love it. And let's see what you got here in your comment section. One of her first comments is that the word fan comes from the Latin word fanatic. Yeah. And I am a fan of no one because I realize that as humans, We all have faults, but I recognize talent in business, philanthropy, and art. Thank you so much for saying that. Exactly. Exactly. You can like what people are doing and you can love the work they're doing, but you shouldn't fawn into adoration and worship to the point where when something comes to light about them, you're embarrassed and feel like you're a part of it. And Lorna also says that, let me see if I can read this, I'm having trouble. That this happens in the animal kingdom. Eagles that have more than two eaglets tend to destroy the third. Oh, that's interesting. Or if there's not enough food, will also destroy the weakest of the two. Ah, that's pretty phenomenal. You know what? I have heard that back in the past. I knew about that. But you are absolutely right. When we're talking about people operating from what we think is normal human behavior, and then you're watching a whole group of people operate in what would seem abnormal, right, to us, but for them, it is their behavior. You're absolutely right. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to remember that about the Eagles. Connie Bowmer. Oh, wow. Another super squatty. Thank you also for being here. I appreciate that. I appreciate that you are here and saying hello to everyone. That is fantastic. I love these. I love your comments are fantastic. Let's see if I can read this one. That is fantastic. And you guys are the super squatties. You don't know how it makes my heart swell. I'm just so glad. And I did get a chance to pop in a little bit more often on the wonderful Royal Sussex because I absolutely adore Royal Sussex, and Baron is fantastic. I have got to get my game up, get my bravery up before I start asking, "Hey, can you take a look at my little channel?" I'm so embarrassed. Okay, Lorna also says that Prince Harry was also talking to the president of Rwanda. I saw that picture of President Kagame. At first, people had like comments under it as if it was Obama. It wasn't. It was President Kagame of Rwanda. I was surprised that he was at the game. And she's saying, okay, he was at the basketball game, and I'm wondering if there is a visit to that country in the future. That would be lovely. That would be lovely. Although, Rwanda, you got to see all the African countries, all of the African countries. I would love for them to just spend a lot of time in Africa, just bouncing around. The the only thing that I would say from the American point of view, and don't get angry with me, is when visiting Africa, especially the leadership in Africa, they sometimes can straddle a fence in their allegiances, I guess I should say. And it's kind of like this Epstein situation. Does just knowing him make you a bad person? And that is kind of what can happen when you are too involved or too inundated with many on the African continent. Now, like I said, don't you all come for me. I'm not saying there's something inherently wrong with the with the African continent, but often the person that you might work with today, praise their leadership and love to work with, then the next year they're being called some type of homicidal maniac. That is that world which is Africa. And it is a tricky one to navigate. But you are correct. Kagame, I don't hear too much going on with or negatively around. And I know he does a lot of work with the UN. You just have to be a little bit, they have to definitely tap dance. Because we also have these African countries that have agreed with the administration currently in the United States to go ahead and just deport your people here. Now, we got to be careful about that. What is that about? Now we know on the surface, money. They're paying these people in various countries millions of dollars to house and hold people being deported from the United States. So you got to be a little bit, you got to be comforting and, oh, I'll shake your hand. But at the same time, you've got to have that antenna up in the back because these people are so intertwined and they're doing yucky stuff with many leaders on the African continent. But yes, I saw that photo and I have no issue with President Kagame. Not yet, right? But we have to keep it open. But it would be lovely for them to just do a bounce around in Africa. People would love it. I know I would. I want to see them out and about, especially as the kids get bigger and then they're able to travel. I would love to see it. So, that being said, thank you so much again. And thank you, Connie Balmer, once again, is saying that the UK was taking immigrants. Yeah. See? Yeah. Yeah. Stuff like that. You want to be friendly, but what does that mean? But often it is because, the people on that continent, they get paid. And I understand that. South America, same thing. These people were being paid to house and store some of our deportable immigrants. So just keep that in mind when we want them to travel and visit other countries. It's one thing, they can go to Japan and they can go to China, and it's almost like it doesn't matter, what the people do there. But African continent can cause a lot of issues. So back to the fallout from your former prince. So again, here's the former prince, just again, perhaps behaving outside of the band that we call normal. And in his band, he could frequently hop on a plane, go over, get with a couple of girls, like in the old movies, bring a couple of chicks, and we'll have a real good time. Okay, so he was operating in that space, which was the 1940s Hugh Hefner, Playboy bunnies, and he's operating in that world, like just a couple of babes, and we'll have a good time, and we'll do this and we'll do that. And as that intersects with people who have a mentality of we can rule the world, right? Like from a James Bond movie. It doesn't matter what we do to the rest of the human population because we rule the world. We have all the money. We have all the assets. We can manipulate people however we want. After all, we can control kingdoms, dun dun dun, like James Bond, like a villain in James Bond. These people are operating outside of the controls and outside of what we perceive. Well, this is something you should do versus this is something you shouldn't do. They don't have that. They don't have that ability to govern themselves. They don't have that in their mind. So here he is gallivanting around doing whatever he's doing, moving people around. And who's catching some of the fallout? Well, along with him now recently being arrested, whatever that means, okay? Because, you get arrested, you get arraigned, you get fingerprinted, your picture's taken, and you're told generally don't leave the state or the country or whatever. I don't know if that's a stipulation for former Prince Andrew, because I said a long time ago, maybe they should have listened to me a year or two ago. They should have put him, to get him out of the news and off of their front page, they should have put him on a plane a long time ago and had him go and pay to have him go stay with someone in the Middle East who lives off on an island that no one can get to. Right? They should have done that a long time. He could live in that area. He could have lived in that region any way he wanted to, right? Because they live by a different set of rules for their royalty. Their royalty lives at a completely different level, right? And they should have done that years ago. But no, he stayed where he stayed under the protection of the current king and the former queen. He has lived and operated and done everything in his life and bounced around under what? The view and the protection of the king currently and the former queen. Now, where is that going to leave his daughters and his ex-wife? Now, remember, here's the thing. Now I'm going to get to the part of just a short chat here, the part that's really making me angry. And they've been doing it forever, but I know other people are talking about it. But now we're getting to the place in this game where we always try to make Harry and Meghan the worst possible creatures on the planet in relationship to the royal family. That the horror that everyone should hate, that everything bad, everything ew was Harry and Meghan, right? Once we couldn't continue to pound and defame and degrade Harry and Meghan, and we let newspapers go berserk on smearing his name and having a chase campaign, just like they did with Princess Diana when she left the fold, right? She became fair game, removing the security, right? That's what we did to Prince Harry and Meghan, snatched their security in the dark of night while they're living in Canada and helicopters are hovering above them taking pictures. We snatch the security, leave them out on their own, let them fend for themselves, and they can be chased and hounded and made fun of, and you talk about them, put them in cartoons. We did all that. But we didn't do that to Prince Andrew, right? Nope. We just said, well, we'll move him from the big house to a smaller place. Well, he can't stay over there. He can stay over here. We're going to think about removing his titles. They did that for how many years? How long have they been thinking about removing his titles? That just came into play because the public, every time they had a news call-in show, the public in the UK started asking, what is he going to do about Prince Andrew? When are they going to do something about Prince Andrew? And that's because things started to drip out of the Epstein files more and more vividly. Drip, drip, drip. It started to turn into a flood. And that is the only reason, you better believe it, the only reason that this royal family has reacted. Because they're trying to save themselves. And they're trying to figure out who the public is going to turn against the most. Let's just keep bringing up Prince Andrew. Matter of fact, let's keep talking about Prince Andrew now that he's been arrested. Actually, did you all see the response from the palace about this after the arrest? Basically, the response was, and I'm going to paraphrase, the response basically was, well, at least the law is taking its course, and we don't have anything to say about any of it right now. Okay, smart move, right? So you can stop looking for statements. You can stop looking for speeches. Meanwhile, the UK public, what are they doing? The king needs to say something. The king needs to do something. So let's see how long it lasts before he may actually have to make a statement. Meanwhile, part two. Foolishly, the tabloid press, the tabloid media, especially in the UK, is continuing to try and give a reason to be angry at Harry and Meghan. It is so foolish of them to do this. But you know what? Let them make their mistake. Let them continue to dig themselves a double-sided grave. Let them continue to do it. They continue. I am amazed at the number of comments and the number of personalities that are still trying to step out in the public arena and say something negative about Harry and Meghan. They're trying to dredge up anything they can. They're trying to put Harry in a picture next to Prince Andrew. Somehow they're trying to make the UK media is actually trying to make the UK public put these two stories together so that whenever you say, we need to strip Andrew of his titles, we also need to strip Harry, just make it a clean slate, right? They have to always add that in. They can't understand it. I do not understand what is wrong with the UK media. They are insane. But again, what did I say? Some entities do not operate on our same frequency. They do not operate with the same rules that we have. I believe every squatty and the rest of us are pretty conveniently secure in this understanding. Harry and Meghan, they don't need your titles. What do your titles do for them? Nothing. They do not earn anything because of the titles. They earn and they are who they are. Why? Because they are Harry and Meghan. And that is bigger than anything that the royal family has to give, especially now. And if they were paying closer attention, I'm going to give the UK media a tip. Here's something that you could tell them if you in the chat and you're a snitch. You need to tell the UK media to stop bringing up Harry and Meghan on tabloid TV, in the tabloid media, in relationship to Prince Andrew. The only thing it is going to do is make the royal family seem more irrelevant than ever. Okay? That's just a free tip from me. But you do what you want to do. You're a different kind of entity. So being the entity that you are, just keep on doing what you're doing. Am I right, folks? All right, guys, I know I've gone off on a tangent, have I not? But you get my point. Meanwhile, let me bring you all back now. Okay, it's about that time. I got to get slowly ready to wrap it up. So meanwhile, the family, they're doing what they do. They're out and about, picking berries, making jam. Okay? And what's Harry doing? Slapping backs, shaking hands. Okay? Chit-chatting with people, making moves, talking about life. Right? Being a dad. Picking up kids and holding balloons. That's what they're doing. So boys and girls, let's let them keep on doing that. Right? And I am here for it 1,000,000 times over. All right? Keep Harry and Meghan in our prayers. Prayers of the saints availeth much, folks. This is the beautiful picture of that family. And who is that family? Why, that's Harry and Meghan, Lily and Archie. That's who that is. No titles required. Okay? But you know what? If you're from a different frequency or you're a different entity, you don't get this. You just don't get it. All right? So we here within the human band of normal, we get this. This is what we're all trying to do. Just live our lives, play with our kids, and do our thing. These folks, on the other hand, they are going to suffer the fallout from the foolishness of individuals around them. They're going to try to figure out how to navigate this world, and they're going to have to navigate this world independent of the foolish attachment that they perceived was given to them by that royal family. They perceived that royal attachment, and they perceived that they would do good things and that they would be rewarded for their good work. But you know what's going to happen? They too might get caught up in that web, right? Because if they need to start shedding weight, shedding people to try to survive. You know, like people who are in a hot air balloon and they're taking a trip. And as the balloon starts to come back down, you know, you have to release and drop sandbags that are attached to the balloon. Basically, you have to drop weight so that your balloon will continue to rise. And they always do that when in a panicked situation and you're losing altitude. And there is nothing losing altitude faster than the royal family. They are coming down. They are crashing. And so in order for them to survive, you had best believe they are going to start dropping weight. Okay? They just want the rest of the world to believe that that weight is Harry and Meghan. Right? That weight is not Harry and Meghan. If they had maintained operating with decent respect, you know what? They may have never had to approach this particular event. Right? If they had been decent and kind and helpful to all others, they may not have ever gotten to this point. Am I right? Of course I'm right. Of course I'm right. Of course I am right. Right? Of course I am. So also, I want to say, before I wrap it up here, good day to Joyce Anderson. Thank you also for being here. I told you I love to see you folks. The Super Squad is joining in. Thank you so much for being here. It is fun to have you guys on tap and in the chat. I get a kick out of it. You just don't believe. And Joyce Anderson continues by saying Prince Andy was not arrested. He needs to be jailed in American jail. We got something for him. You know, it makes me nervous, though, because if they brought him over here, you know, he would disappear in the system, right? Just like your girl, Jelaine, right? I don't know. And then also here, you gotta, the flimsy part here right now, I know you guys are watching these files and we're gonna keep up the good work. But over here, we would have to come up with what is the crime, you know, from the US perspective. What are we criming? What are we dealing with? So that would be a problem as well, right? It would be an issue. So what I want to do is tell you guys, this young lady, Virginia Giuffre, I purchased her book as well. I have to say, much of it is somewhat biographical. And I do want to emphasize, especially if any of you are interested in reading it, but you haven't read it, you do begin to understand that a lot of these young ladies that are featured in the Epstein arena, in that circle, they are often already in precarious situations. You know, many of them were, I would say, girls of a questionable reputation or in an abusive situation. So it made them, if they were pretty especially, like she is a very pretty young lady, but if they were pretty girls, you know, it made them very usable. Very sad situation. But if you're interested in reading some of her material, and now as the Epstein files are dripping out, people are beginning to put things together. So you can see what is written in the Epstein files versus what is being said, perhaps by her in her books. And some of these things are pointing out more information and more places to look for some of this foul behavior. Truly interesting story. But yes, your RF, folks, I'm sorry, but in a science fiction kind of way, predicting their behavior is very difficult because it is operationally outside of what would be normal for the human genome. Okay, so I'm saying it like that, and you can do with that whatever you think is best. Am I right? Okay. All right, guys, look, I'm about to wrap it up, and I promise you, I will not keep you forever. But you know, when you hear that little twinkle sound, hear that sound. That means I have a short little message for you. Now, of course, you are not being converted to a cult. I just like to tell you a Bible verse or two that comes to mind when I am watching or experiencing or listening to the news and stories of the day and the week. And I got to get a little bit more information before, again, I comment on things thoroughly. But look, let's take a look at the Bible verse for this time. And let's see if these speak to you in any way, given what we are dealing with. I thought very quickly, what do you say? Not quickly, but I thought very interestingly about people who are doing things that they shouldn't be doing, at least, again, in the normal human realm, how you will come out of that if you intend to come out of it. So Proverbs 28, Proverbs is one of those chapters that I enjoy so much because it's almost like catchy sayings, like your parents might say something to get your attention. Proverbs 28 says, "Whoever conceals his transgressions will not prosper." Let me repeat that line. Whoever conceals his transgressions will not prosper. Now, folks, I know what you're thinking. Does this mean that worldwide, 100% of the time, people do things and they don't get away with it? Of course not, right? Of course not. It's just more of a sentiment in the grand scheme, because often people reap what they have put out, but it might be at a distance. For example, I had the photo of the family. You see, the individual may not take the hit for what's happening, but it's going to filter out and spill out on others. And in the grand scheme, everything that you try to keep under wraps will probably fall out somewhere. Maybe you will see it, maybe you'll live to see it, maybe not. But if generally cause and effect, right? And then it continues that, but he who confesses and forsakes them will obtain mercy. In other words, if you did something that you shouldn't have done, if you committed some type of negative action, do your best to confess what you've done and to make it right. And perhaps you may obtain mercy, or at least in that event, you can ask for mercy. But if you don't try to atone for it, well, no mercy will be given, right? Now, Galatians then goes on to talk about, this is Galatians 6:5, and it's just a simple statement. It says, "For each will have to bear his own load." I don't know if you all are interested, but whenever they do the story about the crucifixion of Christ, they generally show this scene, and Christ is trying to carry the cross himself as he is walking, and he's bearing the cross to the crucifixion point. But there is a scene where he stumbles and he stumbles to the point that a passerby is grabbed out of the crowd and given the cross to carry for him. That is a very significant scene in the Bible. And it is a very significant situation that for a time, someone else was bearing that cross. But with that being said, when it comes to responsibilities for things that these people have done, whether it's in the past, long time ago, or in the recent past, the warning is that each will have to bear the load for those circumstances. And then lastly here, Romans 14:12. So then each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. So again, thoughts for you to think about, but I'm not trying to get you recruited into anything. And hey, if you're a person who heads out to church on Sunday, I hope you enjoy your services or your Sunday school. And I want to thank you, and I appreciate the fact that you spent a little bit of time sitting here listening to me babble on and on, because Harry and Meghan, oh, they're still going to need your prayers. Because whether this mess stays up or if this family goes down, somehow, given whatever the circumstance, they are going to try their best to somehow, if they can, they're going to try their best to trample Harry and Meghan underneath their shoes in the meantime. So thank you guys again for being here, and come again. Tell all your friends, because I need to have a membership drive. Thanks again for being here at All for Success. You can do it. I know we can.